The weekend began with a chilling wave of uncertainty across Los Angeles. On Friday, June 6, 2025, federal agents from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, launched a series of large-scale raids throughout the city. These operations were sudden and aggressive, catching many communities completely by surprise. The actions were part of a wider national strategy directed by the Trump administration to increase deportations. For millions of Angelenos, the day was marked by fear and confusion as news of the federal sweeps spread rapidly through neighborhoods, text messages, and social media alerts, turning familiar streets into zones of anxiety and distress. The city held its breath, wondering what would come next. The scope of the operation was extensive, targeting various locations where immigrant communities live and work. Federal agents were seen in the bustling Garment District, a hub of commerce and labor for many newcomers. They also appeared at a Home Depot in the Westlake area, a common gathering spot for day laborers seeking employment. The raids even extended into the night, with agents descending upon an underground nightclub where they detained several Chinese and Taiwanese nationals. In addition to these public sweeps, federal agents also executed 4 separate search warrants at 3 different locations in central Los Angeles, based on suspicions of people harboring undocumented immigrants, escalating the intensity of the enforcement. Initial reports on the number of arrests varied, adding to the chaotic atmosphere of the first day. ICE officials initially confirmed that 44 individuals had been arrested for civil immigration violations, with 1 additional person arrested for obstructing the work of federal agents. However, as the weekend progressed, the numbers grew. By Saturday, the Department of Homeland Security reported that the total number of arrests for the week in Los Angeles had climbed to 118. Some community organizations and media outlets monitoring the situation reported that the number was even higher, possibly exceeding 120 arrests by the time the major operations concluded on Saturday evening. The official justification provided by the federal government for these aggressive actions was a focus on national security and the rule of law. ICE Director Todd Lyons stated that the agency's nationwide efforts average about 1,600 arrests each day, with a primary focus on apprehending individuals deemed to be dangerous criminals. President Donald Trump's administration framed these raids as a necessary component of a broader policy aimed at mass deportation. This rhetoric, however, stood in stark contrast to the reality on the ground, where families were separated and communities known for their vibrancy and hard work were thrown into a state of profound fear and instability. The community's response to the raids was immediate and forceful. As news of the arrests spread like wildfire, Angelenos from all walks of life took to the streets to voice their outrage and stand in solidarity with their immigrant neighbors. Protests erupted across the county, from the dense urban core of downtown LA to the suburban streets of Paramount. On Friday, demonstrators quickly gathered outside the Metropolitan Detention Center downtown, where many of the arrested individuals were being held. The crowd grew larger and more vocal as the evening wore on, chanting slogans and demanding the immediate release of those who had been detained by federal agents. The peaceful protests, however, soon escalated into tense and sometimes violent confrontations. In downtown LA, the demonstration outside the detention center was declared an unlawful assembly by the Los Angeles Police Department after some individuals in the crowd reportedly threw pieces of concrete at officers. Law enforcement responded with force, deploying tear gas, flashbang grenades, and other less lethal munitions to disperse the protesters. The air filled with smoke and the sounds of chaos, turning a peaceful gathering into a scene of conflict. Similar tensions flared elsewhere, transforming city streets into battlegrounds between demonstrators and law enforcement trying to maintain control. One of the most significant clashes occurred on Saturday in the city of Paramount, near a Department of Homeland Security office. Hundreds of protesters converged on the area, blocking streets with overturned shopping carts and debris. The demonstration intensified when a bonfire was started in the middle of the street, and reports later confirmed that a car had been set on fire in nearby Compton. In response, federal agents, including Border Patrol officers outfitted in full riot gear, moved in to clear the area. They used tear gas and flashbang grenades against the crowd, creating a volatile and dangerous situation that lasted for hours and resulted in several arrests. Amid the chaos, Several individuals were arrested, including prominent community leaders. David Huerta, the president of SEIU California, was taken into custody while he was reportedly documenting one of the raids. He was later charged with impeding a federal agent, an accusation that his supporters vehemently denied. His arrest symbolized the high stakes for those who chose to stand up and challenge the federal operations. The clashes highlighted a deep division, with federal authorities determined to carry out their orders and a passionate, resilient community equally determined to protect its members and resist what they saw as an unjust and cruel enforcement action. The federal actions drew swift and sharp condemnation from California's top political leaders, who accused the Trump administration of using the raids to incite fear and division. Governor Gavin Newsom described the deployment of federal agents and the National Guard as a purposefully inflammatory act designed to sow chaos rather than address any real public safety need. He firmly stated that there was no unmet need for the National Guard in Los Angeles and made it clear that while he would deploy additional California Highway Patrol officers to maintain peace, they would not, under any circumstances, assist ICE with its immigration enforcement operations. Los Angeles. Mayor Karen Bass echoed the governor's sentiments, fiercely criticizing the raids as a tactic intended to sow terror throughout the city's diverse and vibrant immigrant communities. She, along with all 15 members of the Los Angeles City Council, issued powerful statements denouncing the federal government's actions. They pledged to use the city's resources to protect immigrants and uphold Los Angeles' status as a sanctuary for all its residents, regardless of their immigration status. The unified front presented by local leadership sent a clear message to Washington that the city would not stand by silently while its residents were being targeted. In response to the growing unrest, the Trump administration doubled down on its position. On Saturday, the White House announced the deployment of at least 2,000 National Guard personnel to Los Angeles, citing the need to support federal law enforcement operations against what they termed violent mobs. President Trump signed a memorandum authorizing the deployment, and troops began arriving that very night. Officials from the White House and the Department of Justice vowed to continue the enforcement operations and promised to prosecute anyone who obstructed federal agents, signaling that the federal government had no intention of backing down despite the widespread local opposition. While political leaders engaged in a war of words, community organizations and advocacy groups were on the ground, providing direct support to those affected by the raids. Immigrant rights groups like the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, or CHIRLA, and Asian Americans Advancing Justice mobilized rapid response networks. They operated hotlines to report ICE activity, distributed Know Your Rights cards in multiple languages, and organized legal aid clinics for families searching for their detained loved ones. The Mexican consulate was also actively involved, providing assistance to at least 11 of its nationals who had been arrested, showcasing a multi-pronged effort to provide a safety net for the community. The immediate aftermath of the raids left a deep scar on the city, particularly concerning the conditions in which detainees were held. The Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown Los Angeles, a federal facility, became severely overcrowded. Reports emerged that the center, originally built to hold about 100 people, was now housing over 200 detainees from the weekend sweeps. Activists and lawyers raised alarms about the inhumane conditions inside, citing a lack of adequate access to food, clean water, and necessary medical care for those being held. The situation grew so dire that it drew the attention of elected officials. In a powerful display of concern, a delegation of U.S. representatives, including Jimmy Gomez, Luz Rivas, Norma Torres, and Lou Correa, attempted to inspect the detention facility to verify the reports of overcrowding and poor conditions. However, they were denied entry by federal authorities, a move that only intensified public outrage and fueled suspicions that the government was trying to hide the truth about the situation inside. The denial of access to sitting members of Congress became a major point of contention, symbolizing the lack of transparency and accountability that characterized the entire federal operation from the very beginning. Beyond the detention centers, the raids cast a long shadow of fear over immigrant communities throughout Los Angeles. Advocacy groups reported widespread panic, with residents sharing sightings of ICE vehicles near schools, churches, and local businesses, places that were once considered safe. This climate of fear disrupted daily life, as many parents kept their children home from school and workers stayed away from their jobs, afraid they might be arrested and separated from their families. The economic and social fabric of these neighborhoods was strained, as the trust between residents and any form of authority was severely eroded by the week's events. These raids, though shocking, were part of a larger, troubling trend of increased immigration enforcement. Statistics showed that even before this recent escalation, removals and detentions in the Los Angeles area had already been rising dramatically. Yet, the events of June 2025 marked a significant turning point. They ignited a powerful, unified resistance from local leaders and community members who refused to be intimidated. The chaos and clashes revealed a city deeply divided by federal policy, but also profoundly resilient, with its people ready to organize, protest, and support one another in the face of injustice, reaffirming their commitment to being a city of welcome for all.